This is the story of why Wendy Richard left EastEnders after almost 22 years as Pauline Fowler, and why her final months on the show became one of Walford's most painful exits. The actress who had played Pauline from the very first episode in February 1985 did not leave because viewers had forgotten her, or because the character had no history left. Wendy Richard left because she believed EastEnders had turned Pauline Fowler into someone she was never meant to become. From the beginning, she belonged to the original fabric of Albert Square, and by the time Wendy Richard left in 2006, Pauline was the second longest running character in the show and one of only 2 original characters still remaining after almost 22 years. That made her exit enormous. Pauline was not glamorous like Angie Watts, Pat Butcher, or Peggy Mitchell. Her power came from somewhere plainer and harder. She was the long-suffering matriarch, the woman in the cardigan, the mother, the widow, the family anchor, and the person who seemed to carry the whole Fowler name on her shoulders. Wendy Richard understood that character better than anyone. She understood where Pauline came from, what Arthur meant to her, what Lou Beale meant to her, and why the Fowler family mattered inside EastEnders. That understanding made the ending so painful for her, because, in Wendy Richard's own words, Pauline should never have remarried. Pauline, she believed, should have been like her mother, Lou Beale. She would never have remarried. She would have sat in her chair in the corner and watched her grandchildren grow up. EastEnders pushed Pauline in a different direction. Joe Mesa entered her life through salsa classes, and although Pauline was hesitant at first, the relationship developed until she remarried in 2006, after almost a decade alone. EastEnders screened it to coincide with the show's 21st anniversary, and the idea behind the storyline was to give Pauline a new lease of life. For Wendy Richard, that new direction did not ring true. The executive producer eventually convinced her to go along with the storyline, but she still fought successfully for Pauline to keep the Fowler surname. That detail says everything about how protective she still was. Fowler was not just a surname. It carried Arthur, Lou, the early years of EastEnders, and the family history that helped shape the program from the beginning. Even when Wendy accepted the marriage storyline, she did not want Pauline's identity stripped away. Once that history began to feel threatened, Wendy Richard reached the point where she could no longer continue. On 10th of July 2006, the BBC confirmed that Wendy Richard had decided to leave EastEnders after nearly 22 years on the show. The official announcement did not offer a dramatic hidden reason, because Wendy Richard was unhappy with Pauline's direction, especially the marriage to Joe Mesa, and the way the character was being changed before her exit. In an interview with the Biography channel, she explained that she had asked them not to make Pauline nasty before she left, but unfortunately they did. She admitted she was not happy with the way it was done, because they were changing Pauline's character. Then came the line that explains the whole departure. Pauline would never have remarried. Wendy said Pauline would have remained a widow, sitting in that chair in the corner. That was what show creator Julia Smith wanted, and that was what Wendy felt was right. So she resigned. That is the truth behind Pauline Fowler leaving EastEnders. Age was not the reason. Health was not the reason. Wendy Richard had not stopped caring about the show. In many ways, the opposite was true, because she cared so much about Pauline Fowler that she left when she believed the character no longer made sense. Actors leave soaps for all kinds of reasons. Some want new roles, some grow tired of the schedule, and some feel they have simply reached the end of the road. Had carried for nearly 22 years. Joe Mesa became the point where the story broke. Wendy Richard said she had no chemistry with Ray Brooks, who played Joe. She also said Joe was half the man Arthur had been, calling him weak and untruthful, and explaining that he had used Pauline and lied to her. Difficult. Wendy believed the relationship failed emotionally, historically, and dramatically. Pauline Fowler had lost Arthur, lived as a widow, and built her identity around loyalty, bitterness, family, and memory. Joe did not belong in that space. Producers may have wanted to refresh Pauline, but the actress playing her felt the story was doing the opposite. Instead of giving Pauline a new lease of life, Wendy believed they were pulling her away from the character's truth. That conflict shaped everything that followed. By late 2006, Pauline's marriage to Joe had collapsed into misery. His past and behavior created more arguments. The final months became darker and more bitter. and Wendy Richard later described the storyline as depressing. She felt Pauline had been changed, and that is why the Christmas Day ending carried so much weight. On 25 December 2006, Pauline Fowler made her final appearance. An estimated 10.7 million viewers watched that Christmas episode, which shows how much attention still surrounded her departure after nearly 22 years on screen. The final story itself was brutal. Pauline discovered Joe insulting her family, and she responded by smashing a plate over his head. After the confrontation, she collapsed and died of a presumed brain hemorrhage. Pauline Fowler was not simply another character leaving EastEnders. She had been there from episode 1, and she had lived through family tragedy, widowhood, hardship, illness, rose, loss, and decades of domestic drama. BBC controller of continuing drama, John York, said Wendy Richard occupied a huge place in people's hearts. Executive producer Kate Harwood said that, for many years, Wendy simply was EastEnders for the audience, and that Pauline's indomitable nature typified the grit and fight of the EastEnders spirit. Those tributes show the size of the loss. Pauline, though, was never a simple character to love. Some viewers saw her as a soap legend and a television icon. Others found her miserable, difficult, and draining. In a 2004 Radio Times poll of more than 5,000 people, 13% wanted Pauline Fowler retired from the show. She was voted the 35th most annoying person of the year in a BBC Three poll, and she was the only fictional character on that list. That split reaction feels very Pauline. She could be loved and resented at the same time. To some people, she represented the heart of EastEnders. To others, she had become unbearably dour. She stood as a link to the show's roots, while also becoming someone some viewers wanted gone. Even that backlash proves how much she mattered. Nobody argues that passionately about a character who means nothing. Pauline's misery, cardigan, long-suffering nature, and sharpness had become part of EastEnders' identity. Whether viewers loved her or complained about her, she was embedded in the program's history. Wendy was already known for Are You Being Served, but Pauline Fowler became the role that defined the second half of her career. From 1985 until Christmas 2006, she played Pauline through almost the entire span of the show's first 22 years. Pauline became tied to EastEnders' central family story. She was married to Arthur Fowler. She was mother to Mark and Michelle. She belonged to the Fowler family, one of the founding families of the program. Arthur's death in 1996 left Pauline widowed, and that widowhood became central to how Wendy Richard understood her. That is why the remarriage mattered. To Wendy, Pauline marrying Joe Mesa went against the deeper architecture of the character. Pauline should have remained Arthur's widow. She should have become like Lou Beale. She should have stayed in that chair in the corner, watching the next generation grow. That image is very specific. It shows Wendy Richard was thinking beyond her own screen time. She was thinking about EastEnders as a family saga, about older women as keepers of memory in soap, and about Pauline as a continuation of Lou Beale, shaped by grief, duty, and family loyalty. When the show moved against that, Wendy pushed back. She fought for the Fowler surname, and then she resigned. That resignation was not just a career choice. In the BBC special EastEnders Revealed, Goodbye Pauline, which aired on New Year's Day 2007, she reflected on Pauline as a good, kind, loving woman whose struggles were often overlooked. That is a very different picture from the Pauline viewers saw in her final months. The contrast makes the exit sadder and still kept goodness underneath. In the end, she felt the show had pushed Pauline into nastiness before she left. That was exactly what she had asked them not to do. The final storyline did not only upset Wendy Richard. The Times critic Tim Tiemann described Pauline's exit as a landmark episode and called the scenes between Pauline and Dot the most moving in a soap that year. He attacked the exit as a mess, called the final scene unconvincing, and criticized Wendy Richard's performances harshly. That contrast shows how polarizing Pauline remained to the very end. Even her goodbye could not produce one clean reaction. For some viewers and critics, it marked the loss of an EastEnders institution. For others, it ended the run of a character they had grown tired of. For Wendy Richard herself, the central issue was not whether everyone liked Pauline. The issue was whether Pauline was still being written truthfully. Wendy believed she was not. That is why the story has lasted. She explained her discomfort in clear terms. Pauline would never have remarried. The show was changing Pauline's character. The Fowlers had gone completely, and there was so much history with that family. That final point matters. The Fowlers were not just Pauline's family. They were part of EastEnders' foundation. Losing Pauline meant losing one of the last major connections to the original domestic world of Albert Fox Square. By the time she left, Pauline was one of only 2 original characters still remaining after almost 22 years. Her departure was not just another cast change. It was the end of a founding presence. The way she left made that loss sharper. A Christmas Day death should have felt like a major tribute. It should have felt like EastEnders saying goodbye to one of its original pillars. Instead, Pauline's final story was filled with bitterness, conflict, a broken marriage, family arguments, and a death that came after she had been pushed into a version of herself Wendy Richard did not recognize. That is the tragedy. The actress who knew Pauline best did not believe in Pauline's final chapter. Still, the industry recognized Wendy Richard's contribution. In May 2007, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the British Soap Awards. Todd Carty, who played her on-screen son Mark, presented it to her and described Wendy as the heart and soul of EastEnders, as well as an inspiration to everyone in the cast. That moment showed the respect she still commanded. Whatever anyone thought of Pauline's final storyline, Wendy Richards' place in EastEnders history was secure and become one of the faces viewers associated with the show itself. When the Queen visited the EastEnders set in 2001, Wendy Richard was the first actress introduced, and she accompanied the Queen and Prince Philip on their tour of the set. That was more than soap fame. That was national recognition. Pauline Fowler may have been a fictional woman in a cardigan, living in a fictional square, but Wendy Richard turned her into part of British television culture. Wendy Richard died on 26 February 2009, aged 65, after breast cancer. Pauline remained dead in the story, but the character's legacy continued. For EastEnders' 40th anniversary, Pauline appeared again briefly through archive footage alongside Arthur, and both characters were credited. That detail says a lot. Nearly 2 decades after her final episode, Pauline Fowler still belonged to EastEnders' memory. The show could not tell its own story without returning to her. Even after the difficult exit, the arguments over Joe, and the criticism, Pauline remained part of the program's foundation. That is why Wendy Richards' disagreement with the final storyline matters so much. This was not a passing character leaving because of one unpopular plot. This was a founding actress saying the show had misunderstood the woman she had played for almost 22 years. Pauline should not have been made nasty before leaving. Pauline should have remained tied to Arthur's memory. Pauline should have stayed Fowler. That is the emotional center of the whole story. It is easy to reduce the exit to one sentence and say, Wendy Richard left because Pauline married Joe Mesa. The real issue was bigger than Joe. Joe represented the break. He represented the moment Wendy felt EastEnders had moved too far away from Pauline's truth. Writers tried to give Pauline a new lease of life, while the actress felt they were pulling her away from the character Julia Smith had helped create. That is why Wendy said, "So I resigned." Those words are blunt. No hidden conspiracy is needed. No vague speculation is needed. Though no bigger feud has to be invented. She resigned because she believed EastEnders was changing Pauline in a way that betrayed the character. There was another side to it. Producers clearly understood Pauline's value. Kate Harwood praised Wendy's contribution. John York acknowledged her place in people's hearts. The BBC marked Pauline's departure with a special program. The British Soap Awards gave Wendy a Lifetime Achievement honor. The show was not pretending she meant nothing. The conflict was about creative direction. Producers wanted to move Pauline forward. Wendy Richard believed that direction was wrong. The show wanted a late-life romance and a dramatic final chapter, rooted in Fowler history and the original shape of the character. Neither side could carry on as before. The character was killed off. That decision ended Pauline permanently. Unlike characters who leave Walford and return years later, Pauline's Christmas Day death closed the door. There would be no future comeback, no surprise visit, no quiet return for a family funeral, and no chance for writers to repair the character. Once Pauline died, her story was fixed. That is why the final storyline matters so much. A living exit can be softened later. Writers can bring the character back, explain the old choices, heal damage, and restore what viewers felt had been lost. Death makes the final version definitive. For Pauline Fowler, that final version was one Wendy Richard had openly questioned. That is the painful part. The person who had lived with Pauline for nearly 22 years watched EastEnders take her somewhere she did not believe Pauline would go, and then watched the character die there. For viewers, that is why the exit still feels uncomfortable. Pauline Fowler was difficult. She could be bitter, harsh, suffocating, and miserable. She was also one of the original anchors of EastEnders. She carried history, her cardigan, her chair, her family loyalties, her grief over Arthur, and her stubborn sense of what was right, all formed part of the show's identity. That identity did not need to be pretty. EastEnders was never built only around likable people. It was built around pressure, family, class, grief, resentment, survival, and people trying to keep going when life gave them very little softness. She was not always easy to watch, but she made sense inside it. That is why changing her too far became so dangerous. If Pauline stopped feeling like Pauline, something deeper was lost. Wendy Richard sensed that. Fans sensed it too, even when they disagreed about whether they liked Pauline. Some viewers were devastated by her departure. One fan said it was so sad because they had watched her for 20 years and she was such a large character. Another said that if Pauline went, EastEnders was finished. That may sound dramatic, but it captures what original characters mean to long-term viewers. They are not just people in plots. They are proof of continuity. They remind the audience where the show came from. Pauline's exit did exactly that. After her death, the Fowler family, as Wendy understood it, was gone, saying it was a shame because the Fowlers had gone completely, and there was so much history with that family. That is one of the saddest lines in the whole story. She was not only mourning Pauline, she was mourning the end of a family. A soap family is built from more than characters. It is made from memory, old rooms, old arguments, old grief, old photographs, and the sense that one generation still carries the weight of the last. In the end, Wendy Richards' exit was a battle over what Pauline Fowler was supposed to mean. To the producers, Pauline's remarriage to Joe Mesa offered a new lease of life. To Wendy Richard, it broke faith with Arthur, Lou Beale, Julia Smith's original vision, and the Fowler history that had shaped Pauline from the start. That disagreement could not be smoothed over forever. 7 million viewers watched Pauline Fowler collapse and die through a final storyline even the actress herself did not believe in. That is the truth behind Pauline Fowler leaving EastEnders. Wendy Richard did not walk away because Pauline no longer mattered. She walked away because Pauline mattered too much. She believed the character had been changed, pushed into a marriage that did not fit, and made nastier before leaving, despite her own warning. When Wendy said Pauline would never have remarried, she was not just talking about one storyline. She was defending the whole history of the woman she had played since 1985. That is why Pauline's exit remains one of EastEnders' most painful goodbyes. It was not only the death of a character, it was the moment the actress who had helped build the Fowler family decided the show no longer understood Pauline Fowler.